So, thank you everyone for coming today. So this is another of our installments of the WHT Alumni Webinar Series. The alum today is Idris Bello, the Afropreneur. Idris has experienced almost all phases of the tech lifecycle. So he started as a student of computer engineering from Obafemi Awolowo University in Nigeria. This was followed by a master in computer science, an MBA, and a master in global health science at the University of Oxford as a Weidenfeld-Hoffmann scholar. Since leaving Oxford in 2012, Idris has played a lead role in building the African technology ecosystem, mentored and catalyzed scores of contributors across the growing African landscape. He co-founded the Loftyinc Afropreneur Fund and the Afropreneur Angel Group, which have invested millions of dollars in over 30 early stage companies in Africa, including Andela and Flutterwave, while training over 7,000 entrepreneurs through the Wennovation Hub, which he also co-founded. So Idris will give us today a presentation, and we'll have half an hour after the presentation for an open conversation. So the floor is...
Okay. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Good. So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. Okay, so can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Good. Okay, so thank you very much to everyone, particularly the organizers. It is indeed a pleasure to have this opportunity to share with you, both the folks on the call and the folks who hopefully in time to come would watch this, right? My journey over the past decade in the field of African entrepreneurship and supporting young Africans, and the ups, the downs, and the lessons in particular, and what's next. So like Tayo said earlier, I graduated from the University of Oxford in 2012 from Kellogg College with a master's in global health science. And I was what is now referred to as an Acadian scholar from the United States of America, USA. And it's quite funny that I actually attended Oxford on a Weidenfeld WHC scholarship as an American, because while I have dual citizenship, I had applied and was hoping to get a couple of scholarships for Africans. I remember there was ExxonMobil scholarship and a few other ones. But as much as I tried, they told me I had been out of Africa for too long, and so I did not qualify, right? And it was so fun. I ended up being one of the 5 Americans who got accepted in 2011. And that was at the point in time when the scholarships were not really accepted. It was not open to Africans. So it is quite interesting and joy now that there's a large percentage of the scholars now who are from Africa. At that point in 2011, it was not open to Africans. But anyways, I got in as the African American or the American African or something, and the rest, as we say, is history. So I wanted to start this with a picture of the man to whom we all owe the scholarship, right, Lord Weidenfeld, now of blessed memory, who instituted this scholarship and who I had the chance to meet at various times before I started at Oxford and while at Oxford and even after Oxford, and did really enjoy many stories from him up to back to World War II and the rest, right? And so we thank him and his family and all other folks who continue to support the scholarship. I think this picture was taken in 2012 at the annual ball that we had at, I think, was it Buckingham Palace or somewhere? It's one of those rare occasions you see me dressed up in a bow tie. And this, I think, was taken at the home of Sir Ivo and Lady Roberts, who were our academic counselor and advisor during the scholarship. And I think this was my set, right? A wide diversity of people. And yeah, and this was also with the chancellor of the university, who was also the head of the BBC back then in 2012. Again, great memories. So that's said. I want to start from the beginning, before Oxford, because when we talk about African entrepreneurship today, and particularly my own journey, it is a journey of about a decade. I started just before I came over to Oxford. So 2010 was when I was in business school in Texas, and I started looking at the field of entrepreneurship, and I met with a couple of other gentlemen in Houston, and we decided to go back to Nigeria and institute something called the Wennovation Hub. And you can see this email. This was one of the very early emails we shared between each other then in November 2010, which is exactly 10 years ago. And the concept was we're looking at how do you leverage innovation to provide high impact jobs in Africa, particularly in Nigeria, where we came from. And I think one of our mentors who was on the call today, Marsha Wolf, who was living in Dallas then, and she too has spent a lot of time on the continent, and so she gave us a lot of support then. But again, at that point in time, that was the idea. We had no clue how it was going to happen, but we just had that vision and passion and said, we're going to set up an accelerator, a tech hub, a program in West Africa to train entrepreneurs and provide, and hopefully they would produce jobs. We had no clue how it was going to work out, but that was the idea. And when we came up with the name Wennovation, the idea was we were looking at collaborative innovation, right? So looking at the innovation as not something that just one person can do, but as they say in Africa, it takes a village to raise a child. And that was the idea, that we innovate together, right? The we also there was also standing for West Africa when we coined the name. And because of this presentation, I'll share with you our successes over the past decade. So in preparing for this talk, I actually went to dig into my application to Oxford in 2011 to look through the essays I wrote and to share how it's been the driving force and the consistency in the vision, right, in where I wanted to go and what's happened over the decade. Can everyone still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So, and this is taken from part of my application to Oxford in 2011. When I said I would love to benefit from attending Oxford University because I believe that this experience would distill my personal and business experiences, my bent for entrepreneurship, my background in technology and statistics, and blend them with my local roots and global education into a fine brew that would increase my motivation and commitment to providing leadership in solving the complex global health challenges in the world. A lot of words are for something very simple, I know. And then in one of the questions in the application, I think that was actually from the Weidenfeld part. It said, what would you most like to be remembered for? And I wrote back then, December 2010, I said, I would like to be remembered for my contribution towards encouraging entrepreneurship and creativity in the developing world as a tool to lessen the dependence of the citizenry on the state, which affects their willingness to criticize government leaders, thereby perpetuating poor governance. So tying entrepreneurship to a free press and free state and progress, right? And hopefully better governance across the continent. And that was where I was 10 years ago. So I came to Oxford, spent a year, amazing time. I got busy with several things on campus. During that 1 year, I was active with the Weidenfeld program. I also was honored to become the president of the African Society on campus. I also became an executive of the Student Union, representing the 800 medical students on campus. So it was a very busy year. But I never lost sight of the entrepreneurship aspect. And so I was very active in the London space among African and London space, looking at what was going on. And in the course of being at Oxford also, I co-founded a company called Afropreneur Health, which together with students at Church Hill at the biomedical department, came up with these mobile blood pressure monitors. We formed a company around that, and we won the Dell Technology Award in 2012 for that. So I was pretty active with that. But as I left Oxford, I started thinking about how do I move from individual success to significance? How do I achieve more than what I can do by myself, right? How do I leverage the networks I have built to advance entrepreneurship on the continent? And for the current scholars, it was a very different period in the Weidenfeld scholarship then, because the focus was not on entrepreneurship then, it was more on anti-terrorism, dialogues, politics, and stuff like that. I'm pleased to see that it shifted really to focus more on entrepreneurship and leadership these days. But again, despite that, I had a lot of support from the folks in the scholarship then, from Lady Roberts to John Adams, Adamson, and a few other ones who really supported and made the right connections and notes then. And as I was leaving Oxford, I had this interview with CNN back then, where I came up and explained my dream, my thought around what I call Afropreneurship, which was a word I defined, I created, and trademarked till this day. And it's about young Africans who are willing to leverage technology and their global networks and innovation to solve huge challenges and issues on the continent. That was the crux of the interview then, right? And so as I left Oxford, there was what next? And what's happened over the past 10 years, just have to understand some of the challenges, some of the unique qualities or characteristics of the continent itself. Yes, we cannot, Africa is a continent, it's not a country, so, and 54 countries, very diverse, but there's still some unique commonalities, right? From the high proportion of young people, right? Where over 75% of the African population is less than 35 years old. Where people see entrepreneurship not just as a nice to have, but as a necessity in most cases, because the other options are limited. And then, of course, over the past decades, I've watched other continents, I've watched Asia, I've watched other places leverage entrepreneurship to change the destiny of their continent. And so there's that attraction to entrepreneurship on the continent. You also have to put in view what's happened since the early 2000s with the story of Mo Ibrahim, right, and Celtel, and how by introducing Celtel in East Africa, he revolutionized the space by bringing digital telephony and mobile telephony to the continent. And of course, several things spun up from there, including PESA and several other things that I would probably talk about. So again, I was coming in 2010, about 10 years after that had happened. And so we were just there at the cusp of something good happening, right? And I remember another interview where I did with CNN around 2011, where they were talking about 10 tech leaders on the continent. And I was describing the events that were happening daily across the continent, where young people were gathering in hubs, iHub, CC Hub, Wennovation Hub, and across the continent, and ideating and coming up with new ideas. But again, mobile telephony and the rise of it and the decreasing price of cell phones, smartphones, played a huge role in that. And of course, so what's happened is over the past 10, 15 years, you've seen what's called a leapfrog, right? Even though in some circles that's a pejorative word now. But basically, where Africans have been able to create businesses that did not exist before, just by virtue of the growth in mobile internet penetration across the continent and what it enabled them to do. But you also add other things like the increasing return of the diaspora, right? Well-educated Africans who have studied outside of the continent and who were now returning the continent to take their place in what was going on. So all those were factors there. So, but fast forward, because I know I have limited time. So one of the things that happened in the early years after Oxford was we had the Wennovation Hub, and it was training entrepreneurs. But suddenly we realized the need to invest in them because they needed funds to scale these ideas. Unfortunately, most of the funds that were available on the continent were funds that were donated, that were focused on charity, was aid funds. So people, we couldn't approach organizations to actually put money and invest in startups. We also try to speak to local entrepreneurs, local high network individuals, and people were more in tune with real estate investment, oil and gas investment, and didn't really understand this tech thing, right? Again, 10 years ago, 8 years ago. And so the challenge was now, how do you support these entrepreneurs to move to the next scale, next level? And so what happened was I had to call a few of my friends, and we pulled together some small funds, some personal funds from our own funds, and they created something we call an angel fund, which was meant to seed several of these startups. And that was the beginning of what we call now the Afropreneur Angel Fund, right? But then one of the very interesting stories that resulted from that is one very popular startup that everybody knows now called Andela. But that was really the idea. So in 2013, when we invested in Andela, it was very tough raising money on the continent for ideas like this. But this picture was taken actually in 2014 in New York at the UN GA program, where Andela was formally launched. And there you have myself. In the middle, there's Pule, who's also a very active angel and VC in Africa. And of course, Inyaboyeji, the founder of Andela, Flutterwave, Talent City, and now Future Africa Funds. Okay. So I put the title I put on this slide, I said below the gun versus above the neck. One of the things we quickly realized was that while up to that time, Africa had been renowned for its minerals below the ground, we realized that the future was not going to be about that, but the future was going to be about what was above the neck of the young Africans, what was in their brains, their ability to stand up to their peers anywhere in the world, right? So rather than just continue to invest in minerals, resources, and extractive resources, the idea was, why don't we invest in people? And that was really the idea behind what we're trying to do. Again, over a couple of years, we invested in several startups and had some very poor losses. We also had some great wins, right? And that was between the period of 2011, 2012 up to 2017, 18. Where two of our biggest wins then were Andela and Flutterwave, where we had huge returns. Huge returns, not just in terms of financial returns, but in terms of even changing the paradigm around, for instance, development, right, on the continent, right? Programming, software development, and creating jobs locally on the continent, right? So, but then what that led to was now saying, okay, now we've proven that this model can work. We've proven that there are young Africans that if you back them, not only can they bring financial return, but they would also have impact on the continent and create jobs. So how do you scale this up? And so with the partnership and mentorship of one of our advisors, Marsha Wolf, and my other partners, we then registered a new fund called the Loftyinc Afropreneur Fund. And again, the goal was, we had been on the continent working in this space for years. So by 2016, something happened. I would like to say there was particularly the Nigerian technology investment scene before and after Mark Zuckerberg. Because what happened was that in 2016, Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, through the CZI, Charles Zuckerberg investment, decided to invest in Andela Series B. And then it flew down to Yaba in Lagos. And that brought a lot of global attention onto the space that we had been in. And so we saw a lot of investors, a lot of interest in that space. And so that led us to all saying, okay, we're going to register a formal fund that would allow us to be able to support more companies, find more entrepreneurs on the continent, and scale that up. And that was to focus on Sub-Saharan Africa, which was what we knew. But in particular, West Africa, look for companies that had been gone beyond MVP, that had proven the concept, that were starting to generate revenues, and take them to the next level, right? And the focus was going to be on digital platforms. companies that were building digital infrastructure for the continent, from fintech to health tech to ed tech, across the whole space. Our thesis was very simple. It was, we're going to come in very early. We're going to work with those companies to grow, to scale, either locally or to scale globally. And then we're going to find other bigger firms who were going to be more attracted by those startups at that point in time, and then take them to further levels. That was because up to that point, and even up to recently, most of the activity in the African investment scene has been at the later stage, what you call the PE, private equity stages, right? But then, unless you actually invest in the early stages, in the planting and in the seeding and the growing, you are going to have very few companies that make it to the late stages, which means the prices are driven up. And so that was, if we could find more companies to support at the early stage, then you create more likelihood of more companies making it into later stages to increase the deal flow in those stages. Again, strategy was really find local teams, find diaspora teams who are very passionate about solving problems for big emerging markets within their own countries or outside of their countries. Pre-Series A, and would make staged investments in them. Make initially small investments, and over time, as they hit some milestones, would actually make larger investments, and of course help prepare them for later stage institutional funding. And if you look at the series of companies who are followed, these are some names that you're probably very familiar with, from Y Combinator, which several of our companies have had the privilege of finishing from, to Goodcroft, to FIS, Spark Capital, and Google Ventures, and several other ones. Again, proving our model. And like I said, in addition to financial success and revenue returns that we have had and still continue to work on, we've also, it's also been about impact, where we have created thousands of jobs. Andela alone have created thousands of jobs. Flutterwave has created hundreds of jobs. The same thing with Reliance, HMO, and several of our other companies. And these are high impact jobs that did not exist 5-7 years ago. And again, also a huge focus on gender balance, right? Encouraging females really in the software development space. I spoke about Andela earlier, right? So that's one of our big successes, where for our early investment that we did, we've actually done some partial exits at up to 60x of our investment. So even beyond the impact, it's also made a lot of financial returns. And between the main fund itself and the angel funds, we've probably over 30 investments we have made on the continent, from Andela and Flutterwave in Nigeria, to U-Verify across West Africa, to Trailer in Egypt, Eden in Nigeria, Ilara in Kenya, Shifa in Egypt again. So East, while our focus was primarily West Africa, but we've also extended to East Africa and also North Africa, and a couple of partnerships in South Africa itself. Again, in terms of what we've aimed to achieve for the past decade, again, like I said, starting from around 2009, 2010, just before I came to Oxford, I was setting up Loftyinc itself and getting started with the Wennovation Hub. 5 years later, we spread Wennovation Hub from just being in one location to 2 new locations, so from Lagos to Ibadan to Abuja. 2017, 2018, around 2013 also, 2011 to 2013, we started the first fund, which was the Angel Fund. We also co-founded what's called AfriLabs, which is a network of all African technology accelerators and hubs on the continent. Currently about 257 of them across 44 African countries, where we all share best practices, our lessons learned, and support each other. We also co-founded in 2011, 2012, the Lagos Angels Network, one of Africa's most active angel network, and that's also scaled now, where the coordinators of that have now founded the ABAN, so the African Business Angels Network. Now you have the Dakar Angels Network and several angel networks across the continent, all in the past decade. And of course, with the main fund in 2017, 2018, where we started the second fund, the VC fund, expanded to Kaduna, and of course, working with several universities and several partners across the world, including the Gates Foundation, the UN, and several other partners who are focused on building innovation on the continent. Again, our own company, right? So right now we employ over 100 employees in 5 locations. We have the hub in 4 cities, several consultancies, several accelerator programs, and at least 2 venture funds. And I've been lucky, privileged to train over 7,000 entrepreneurs. And one of the interesting things that also happened was, like I said, when we started, there were 4 of us. So there were 4 partners. And what happened was, at that point in time, 3 of us were in diaspora. And one of them was in Nigeria, right? And then what's happened, what's changed is that over the past decade, well, we've vast it, where 3 of us now are on the continent, and there's just 1 person left in diaspora. Beyond tech, also, we're also diversified to look at parts of the economy, right? And the non-sexy parts of the economy, right, that are needed. So from beyond Wennovation Hub and Loftyinc partners, so we now have partners that are into the agricultural space, right, livestock, and solving the issues of nutrition and protein on the continent. We have proven as in the health space, making access to affordable, accessible, healthcare and medication and high quality medication. We have other M&E and other parts of the organization that touch on different parts, right? I think I would, so I'm going to come to the close here so I can take questions, but I wanted to put this because this is probably one of the biggest news this year. And it's one of the reasons why I've gotten so many emails and calls in the past 2 weeks of everybody who wants to become an angel investor. Paystack was founded in 2016, so that was 4 years ago, right, in Nigeria in the fintech space. And it grew from 0 in 2016 to where it was acquired by Stripe just last month for $200 million. So you've grown, and these are young people who study in Nigeria, who only have bachelor's degrees, and found the idea and executed it and created value, creating jobs, creating opportunities for other merchants, and being able to sell in just 4 years. And that's the story of what's possible. And that's why we play in this space. And that's why we invest in young people to solve their own problems. When you compare the value, right? So for those 4 years, Paystack only raised about $12 million. So they were able to take $12 million to create huge solutions that solve huge problems and then exited at $200 million. When you the amount of aid money that's going to Africa, from the World Bank schemes to this scheme, and that you never really see the light of the day. So you start questioning, should we be spending more, should there be more focus on aid for the continent or investment for the continent? So 10 years later, right, what's next? Where are we? What do we do? Again, I've gone back to my Oxford 2011 Oxford application to dig out some of my answers there. So one of the questions the scholarship asked when I was applying in 2010, 2011 was this. It said, describe what the word leadership means to you. And I said, leadership is the ability to focus in on the little things without losing sight of the big picture. The ability to be able to see the forest for the trees. To realize that while you may be unable to solve world hunger, you can still make a difference in someone's life. It is the process of discovering and generating new opportunities in the most unlikely of places and taking on challenges that other people run away from. Leadership is about being able to create more leadership. It is the ability to guide a group of people and set the example while all working together towards a common goal. It is the ability to motivate, relate, and mentor the people you are working with. More importantly, it is the ability to recognize the diversity in thought, call and belief, and level for the common good. When I wrote this 10 years ago, I had no clue where I was going. I had a vision, but I had no idea how it was going to turn out. But again, it goes back to the words of Jeff Bezos, right, where it says, be stubborn on the vision, but flexible on the details. And that's one thing we have done. We've been stubborn on our vision of creating high impact jobs, of giving opportunities to young Africans, of investing in the lives of Africans and creating solutions and tackling problems, while not being clear about the very beginning about how we're able to going to do it, having to evolve from stage to stage, having to pivot as needed, but again, just being stubborn about the details. So as I round up, people ask me, how do I get conversant? How do I understand what's happening in that space? I want to learn more about what's happening in the African space, in the investment space. And I think I have no other better book to refer them to than this book that was written, co-written by one of my very good friends, Efosa Ijomo, and of course by Clayton, late Professor Clayton Christensen, right, who wrote the Innovator's Dilemma, right, and the Prosperity Paradox. And it has case studies of how young African entrepreneurs have over the last decade, been able to leverage innovation to change the story of their countries, and they continue to do so even with little resources that they have. So I think that's the on which I will talk. I promised I was not going to be long-winded, and this is already getting long. But thank you very much. And at this point, I will now take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Idris, for sharing that. Basically, a decade of your life with us in and condensing it in half an hour. I will be. If anyone wants to ask a question, feel free to just raise your hand or post in the chat. I will maybe start with one while people think. So you mentioned that I liked the image, the comparison of like the contrast between below the ground and above the neck. And I think still today, I think I imagine there's still a lot that we can do about what is below the ground and use it more efficiently and more intelligently. So I wonder if you've seen examples recently in the past 5, 6, or 10 years of like tech solutions that have made a change in, say, in mining or in agriculture or in the classic, let's say, resources that Africa was known for.
Yeah, so I think, again, one of the challenges you see in some of those industries is still, it's still very regulated, right? Very regulated, very government involved, very controlled. And so it's probably going to be one of those areas where they grudgingly would allow, things would change. And so take the energy space, for instance, right? And see what's happening over the past couple of years. So at the point in my career, I worked for ExxonMobil, right? And, largest energy company, was top of the, on the stock exchange valuation. But in the past week, you've seen what's happened. Where Zoom, that was founded 10 years ago, has had its valuation actually take over ExxonMobil that's existed almost forever, right? And this is sending the right signal. So governments have been talking to government officials who are now saying this, right? And who are continuing to expend money on the energy sector, on the mining sector, without looking at how, even if you're going to still stay in those sectors, how do you leverage technology to make a difference, right? How do you optimize, right? How do you move within the energy sector from just fossil fuels to renewables, right? With the falling prices of solar cells and all what's happening in that space. And so when you compare a company like ExxonMobil that didn't really embrace climate change, didn't really embrace the new technologies, to other companies, even in the energy industry that embrace it, start seeing the clear differences. And I think this is becoming obvious to governments. And so yes, over the past year, a couple of years, I've seen in the agri space, for instance, I think that's probably one of the best ones, where you've seen a lot of new technologies, from drone technology to real-time monitoring technology to crop monitoring technology that people are now embracing. One of our recent investments are actually, funny enough, out of Lebanon, was in a startup called Starchy. And what does Starchy do? Starchy looks at the post-harvest loss, right? One of the biggest issues we have in developing countries is because of lack of electricity and refrigeration, almost half or even more than that of harvested food is wasted in that process of transportation to the market or even in the market. So how do you preserve this? And again, so this amazing startup came up with a way to leverage starch, right? So organic material to actually protect like apples and similar like that, so to give it another 1 to 2 week shelf life, right? So again, you are starting to see a lot of this new ideas come on in those places. You also have, for instance, in Nigeria, one of our own startups, Batmans, has been looking at that agri chain, where basically most animals are walked in from northern Mali or neighboring areas of Nigeria into the country and walk through the country. And in the process, they cross people's farms. It leads to clashes, between farmers and herders, right? Because they have been used to that nomadic way of life of just grazing the animals, right? And then also the issues that are happening, security issues, and also how do you sustain the quality of the protein you get from those animals? How do you ensure the hygiene of those animals as they move from the farm to your table, right? And so we now have startups that are actually now focusing on new range technology, right? And range level technology to actually keep those animals, track those animals, monitor their feeding, their health, and then building franchises that leverage, allow people to be able to order their meat online, right? Again, all those new things are happening in the space, and we're increasingly seeing a lot of that happening. So again, I tell people it's early days yet, and I usually say this when we go to meet potential investors or institutional investors and ask them to invest, and they ask us, where are the exits? Where's this? Or I will tell them, 10 years ago, this does not exist. Look at what's happened between 2010 and 2020, right? And just imagine what would happen in the next 10 years if you give us the support, if we all do this together.
Thank you. Olatunji, I think, has a question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Temitope. I think I must actually sincerely thank our good friend, Afropreneur Idris Bello, for this very wonderful presentation and for the numerous work that he's actually doing together with his colleagues on the continent. I think it's actually quite commendable, and we're very proud for the great things that you're actually doing. I think I would completely agree that, you see, gone are the days where we say tech is actually the future. Tech is actually no longer the discussion that we'll be talking about, that it's actually the future. It's actually today and tomorrow, because everything that we do actually revolves around it, right? Today, we talk about intelligent transport system in the development space, right? We're talking about tech here. We're talking about climate smart technologies, from energy efficiency and things like that. Like you rightly said, with the issue of oil is becoming non-fashionable, right? People are beginning to look out for very clean, low carbon solutions, and these are all solutions that will be tech driven. All right. So I think this is something that is actually we are very proud of the numerous work that you and colleagues that are working with this within this space are actually doing, and we really look forward to seeing the great and wonderful things that you guys will be doing in the years ahead. So I have 3 questions based on the presentation that you've actually made. That the first is, if you have the opportunity of going back 10 years, right, to 2010, this is 2020, what are the things that you think you would have done differently if you had the opportunity of actually going back to 2010, having to do this all over again? So for someone who is a potential investor looking at some of the things that you're doing in the sector, so it would be good to really understand the things that you would actually do differently. That's my first question. The other thing again is, there are a whole lot of incubators out there that people are talking about, or tech startups, and we hear of the good stories, but there are also tens of them that actually fail. So what are the main pitfalls that you would recommend that for potential persons that are actually looking into these area, this particular space, that we should consider and should always be at back of our mind? And my last question is around, because when people hear investors, they always think it's big money. Like, of course, it is big money. So, and as a result of that, you see individuals most times shy away from it because we believe that it has to be the very big guys, the big angel investors that must bring money for those things to actually happen. Do you see any role for small scale? I'm not donors now, but in terms of crowdfunding, like crowdfunding platform supporting investment of this sort, do you see any role for that, where small individuals at their own small scale, they're able to actually put resources together and on the crowdfunding level, and they're able to actually support initiatives of things like that? So, and of course, particularly looking at it within the context of Africa, do you see these as a viable option that could be considered within the space? Overall, thank you again for the presentation.
Thank you, Olatunji. And and I go way back. I remember in 2012, I think he reached out to me from the out of the blues and said, I saw something by Weidenfeld and I'm applying and I have interviews. Can I talk to you? Yeah, and we had a Skype call. There was no Zoom there, so we had a Skype call, and I'm glad it's done very, very well at Oxford and even after Oxford. Yeah. So on the first question, what I would do differently, I think again, like they say, hindsight is 20/20, right? And you know, things change with time and stuff like that. But looking back, probably would have invested more, and not because when we started, then we just testing things out. We weren't sure where things were going, because we're coming from, if you look step back before 2010, step back 10 years earlier, that was when the economist was describing Africa as a hopeless continent, right? That was when you had from almost every country on the continent had military dictators in power, right? So 2000 Nigeria was just 1 year into democracy. So again, the cell phones were just coming in. So again, 2010, the jury was out. People were not sure whether entrepreneurship was where to go. The World Bank was pushing all its money on aid. You couldn't even get any money for any accelerator or investment back in 2010 for startups then. So again, things have changed. But I think back then, if we knew what we knew now, I think we would probably have invested more, not just for the financial returns, but for the human returns, for the people returns. And I'd like to cite one example. Our first batch of startups that was supported at the Wennovation Hub in 2011, I would say 9 out of 10 of them failed. However, the people did not fail, because fast forward 3-4 years later, when Andela started and was hiring top talent, a lot of those who were hired were people who had failed, those failed entrepreneurs. They now became the foundation for the new startups. So again, it meant that even though we didn't have financial returns from the very early years, we had ended up building people, building talent. And like Andela would say, talent is universally distributed, but opportunity is not, right? And so we had ended up helping inadvertently to build the talent to which opportunities now came to. So again, if there was anything we would do differently, I think we would have been be more bold about the gospel, be more out there about our entrepreneurship and why it's needed, and invest more and more in people. And that's what we tell governments today. Like they say, I think it's an old Chinese saying, that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. The sad thing is governments on the continent are still not investing enough in its young people. They are still focused on extractive industries. They're still focused on the wrong things. And again, God spare our lives, in 10 years' time, we'll be here to review things again, and we'll see, okay, did we really learn from the first decade, right? And hopefully, I hope not just governmental partners, national organizations, aid organizations, there's so much they can do. For instance, as a fund, if I want to raise money from TFIs, institutional funds, it probably will take about 2 to 3 years, and the amount of hoops I have to jump just to raise, let's say, $1 million from an international organization to invest in entrepreneurs. The same organization, if I ask for charity money, I'll probably raise $5 million with no question asked, and just boxes ticked. So something is still wrong there, right? I think that's part of the call to governments and international organizations, that there's so much more that can be done in investing in young people. You see a lot of countries now in Europe talking more about migration, stopping the flow of migration into Germany, stopping lives being lost on the seas. My answer is go back and create jobs at the entry point. Do not even let them have the thoughts of trying to escape their daily lives, right? By jumping on those flimsy boats, right? Go and spend those money investing in startups and companies to create the jobs, rather than spending money trying to fish them out of the waters of the sea. That's on the first one. On pitfalls, again, we continue to learn. It's said that early stage startups, over 75% of them would fail, and we've seen that. And it's even worse. Statistics are probably even worse on the continent, because you are struggling with weak external systems, right? So again, a lot of these entrepreneurs come out of those universities, right? And so you're struggling with that. You're struggling with government bureaucracy. You're struggling with even government creating barriers from several taxes, that snuff out the life of entrepreneurs, of startups at the very beginning, right? To lack of support. You followed what happened in Nigeria, the NSAS protest, right? Where young entrepreneurs cannot go about with their laptops and phones without being harassed and extorted by policemen. So again, those are the issues that would, that affect them. But again, beyond that, at the end of the day, it's all about entrepreneurs. It's all about understanding the market, and which is why, as we have seen the preponderance of increased interest in foreign investors on the continent, we are still said you cannot avoid doing the right things by playing the ground game. You cannot just have what we call like tourist investors. You know, you fly in just like you used to have those tourist aid folks, right? Who, you know, have a gap year, just fly into Africa, no clue, and spend 6 months and go back, right? So you also have a few of that in the entrepreneurship space who just hear of the good things, come and invest, lose money and complain because they have not spent time either to study the ground or understand the context or work with local players like ours who have been there for a decade, who understand the nuances, who understand how to help these entrepreneurs beyond money. So I think, yes, there are the pitfalls, there are issues with integrity, there are issues with capacity, there are issues with finding the right funds at the right time, scaling, but those are normal issues anywhere else. And the idea is how do we increase the odds of success? And that's where we are, what we do at Loftyinc. And then one of the things we've tried to do is to increase, and that goes takes to the third question, to increase the participation of more and more people. The more capital is available earlier in the lives of startups, the higher their chances of succeeding, of surviving, right? A lot of them die very early on because once you go past the F and F, right? They said your first money is raised from friends, family, family, friends, and fools, right? FFF, right? Families, friends, and fools, right? So when you raise that first one, then the next one, right, is usually from angels. And until recently, you didn't have that large number of angels who were willing to take bets on those young individuals. And that is one of the things we have continued to sound the idea and say, okay, with your $1,000, with your $5,000, there's a long way you can go, especially working together as part of angel groups or part of syndicates, where what you bring to the table is not just your funds, but as people who grew up on the continent, who have also had exposure outside of the continent, you bring a lot of things to the table, right? You bring networks to the table, where you bring exposure to the table to support these entrepreneurs even beyond your funding. So I encourage everybody to get involved one way or the other as mentors, as advisors, as small ticket investors, and we can always talk about this, but there's a role for everybody. And also as diaspora entrepreneurs who are going back, taking all you have learned at Oxford and elsewhere, and building startups on the continent. So someone like Loftyinc, right? You great experience at Oxford, great experience with the ISDB around the climate and water. In the next couple of years, the idea is go back to the continent and let's see how we, create businesses, we create startups that solve problems around climate change, around water, leveraging all this expertise you have been able to build.
Thank you very much for. I agree with the call of being involved with at multiple. So there are many ways to get involved with entrepreneurship, and with investing in entrepreneurship. And also, I think it's one of the things we try to kind of hammer into the scholars with the enterprise challenge. I have a question maybe for this specific kind of situation where, I saw some very kind of nice pictures from from a presentation. Now, traveling is a bit difficult because of the global situation. In the past 8 months, how have you been networking, meeting people? Are people finding new ways to do that? Are you adapting?
Yeah, definitely. So first, let me take. I think there was a question I missed, and thank you, Marsha, for pointing that out. And so on the role for small-scale crowdfunding platforms, there's actually an increased role, because even if you look at in the US, right, there's now Angel List, right? Prior to Angel List, most times the only way you could get into these early deals was by being in those being highly networked. So whether you lived in Silicon Valley or you had a friend who lived there who had a great deal very early on. So a lot of us couldn't have gotten into Uber very early on, or any of those big Netflix or Zoom, right? But that's changed with technology now. So with Angel List, as long as you're accredited investor can get on Angel list and join a syndicate and put in $1,000, right? And put in $2,000 and be part of something that in 5 years' time becomes an Uber, right? So that's changing. So on the continent too, we're starting to see, Amasha has been working on some, and we're starting to see other platforms that people are creating. Some around crowdfunding. There's, for instance, right now there's something called wefund.com, I think. I've seen a couple of startups come out of that. And so again, there are new approaches. Again, there are also laws changing, because even in the US, recently they revised the accredited investor rule to be more inclusive. And so on the continent, we are seeing countries come up with new startup acts in Senegal, in Rwanda, in Tunisia, right? And again, governments are opening up. So even right now, in Nigeria, they are revising the 1990 Bank Act, which now allows banks and pension funds to also be more active in the VC space. So again, I think the increasing changes that we're starting to see there. Now to your question about what's changed in the past 8 months. The funny thing is, I think I've actually been more active within COVID in investing than prior to COVID. Because prior to COVID, you had to meet the entrepreneur face to face. You had to, all the way you did things. But now everybody's okay with, emails, jump on Zoom calls, due diligence through other people and stuff like that. So we see a lot of people embracing that. Even see like Y Combinator, right? So at least 2 of the demo days now have held online. The Syndicate, a couple of other programs, right? A couple of other conferences that you had to travel to experience. So now, because of that, you now have access to other people. What's also happened is this: there were a couple of syndicate accelerators, global accelerators, that were only open to people based in the US or the UK. But because of COVID now, they've opened it up globally because it's Zoom, right? It's and anybody, if there are good ideas anywhere. So it's leveraging the opportunity for people globally, and we're also seeing that on the entrepreneur side.
Thank you very much.
I can see Irina. I think I saw Irina. Irina is there, right?
Sorry, what did you say?
Did I see Irina on the call?
Yeah, Irina is.
That's one amazing entrepreneur. That's one of the first entrepreneurs within the cohorts that I've seen, right? So again, amazing work that she's done. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for sharing your journey. Yeah. It's great to see you, and we are training our new cohort now, and we are trying to support people during COVID to become entrepreneurs, because I guess that's the best way to make change. So thank you.
Yeah, and I was really impressed when I came over last October to Oxford, seeing the enterprise price challenge, seeing the support that was being given to entrepreneurs, seeing what was going on, and also took part in a couple of mentoring during this summer. So I'm really impressed about that. And I think hopefully as they implement the WHC, the trust is able to attract funding from them, right? From supporters of the fund and things like that. I think that will be very helpful. But again, I think that's the way to go, right? Leadership and entrepreneurship. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And you'll be pleased to know that we now have a small seed fund to support alumni enterprises.
That's really good. Again, like I said, a lot of things have happened in the past couple of years, and it's impressive to see that too. And funny story. So when I was at Oxford, I took part in the Tata Idol. So you have because I was part of the OE, the Oxford Entrepreneurs, and the person was the president of my year, very active, very close friend, was the founder of Onfido. Onfido.uk, which is now a multi-million, I think they probably just raised under $100 million, $200 million pounds. So I was there actually when it was being created, right? Someone asked what I would have done differently 10 years ago. I would have put in 1,000 pounds. Yeah, it's probably about 100x or something now. Amazing what they've done. But again, it's very impressive. And hopefully we'll see more and more of that happening.
I'd like to ask you perhaps a question about, have you seen a difference in like how men and women participate into this program.
Yeah.
Maybe you can talk about with this.
Yeah, the gender divide, right? So we've seen it at every step. So we saw it with the hubs where you would call for incubation, and it was largely guys who would show up. And then at Andela, we started Andela, right? And like 90% of the first couple of boot camps were just guys. And so we had to deliberately decide to do female-only boot camps, and then they showed up, and they were much better than the guys, right? So amazing, right? So it's now been very deliberate, understanding what are the inhibitors, what the things are, from environments to how things are set up to timing to different factors, right? And been very deliberate about encouraging them in this space. From also, you see that even not just on the entrepreneur side, even on the funder side, because a lot of VC firms it's still very male dominated, right? And I'm probably going to ask my co-partner to Marsha to say a word. She's still one of the few females in that space. But again, the idea is to continue to increase our participation and provide that support. But we do see it, right? So, but it's getting better. Marsha, you want to say a word? Are you still there?
Hello, everyone. Thank you. This has been a great program. We appreciate what each of you are doing and thinking about, and we welcome you to join us on this exciting journey we've been on together for a decade.
Yeah, thank you. So Marsha is there in California, amazing partner for the fund and for the African space, and spent the last 20, 30 years, different countries on the continent, invested from Uganda to Nigeria to, she's been one of the first few non-Nigerians who've been to our ranch with our cattle in, off Abuja, right, and stuff like that. So amazing support and participation. But again, that's the idea. I think the more of us get to doing this, I think the better, things get, right? We don't want to spend another 10 years with just little stories. We want to, the next decade to be, one that really moves the needle, right? Where it becomes the norm that no matter your opportunity, your idea, no matter where you are on the continent, you can actually scale your idea and, solve problems. And it's going to come with support, with funding, and working with those who are on the ground. So very hopeful, despite all the negative stuff going on, despite the ongoing election today in the US, despite everything, despite COVID, we remain hopeful.
It's all getting better. It's the right trend.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I'll invite you, given that use the opportunity to invite you to next week before giving Idris the final word. So next week, not next week, in 2 weeks' time, same time on Tuesday afternoon, we'll be hearing from Olatunji, who is on the call with us today, and we'll look at a bit at a more maybe macro picture. So Olatunji will be speaking from the perspective of like multilateral development banks and how these are contributing to the finance of climate change action in emerging and developing economies. So hopefully we'll see you, Idris, Marsha, if you want to.
Thank you.
You are more than welcome. So I guess, I'd like maybe with you, have like a few concluding words, Idris, for your cohorts.
Can I ask a last question, if it's possible?
Sure.
It is impressive, everything that you've told and all this journey that you've been through these 10 last years. I just been wondering that you're being very successful in the task of gathering funds to invest in all of these startups and in all of these entrepreneurs. How have you managed to be that successful?
Okay. So maybe I've painted too rosy a picture. We've struggled and we're still struggling. By now we wished, so 2017 when we set out, we thought we could raise within 2 years a new $60 million fund. We still have not completed that. We're still very short of that, right? But what we've done very well is every dollar we've raised, we've invested, right? So because we're very hands-on, we're very involved, and we're going to invest and play a role there. So we need more capital. But again, some things have to change. So if you look at where a lot of the capital for startups, for companies on the continent that have come, it's usually come from these multilateral organizations, the AFDBs, the European banks, the USAID. It's all this. Well, that's why a lot of the capital for aid and was come. But they're very used to working with very large organizations. They're very bureaucratic. They have long processes, right? So you could spend 2-3 years just ticking the box and working through that process, right? And startups are not going to wait for 3 years, right? Waiting for you to get those funds. And so that's why we've gotten very ingenious about finding funds locally from individuals, from angels, from high net worth individuals and stuff like that, while spending the time educating all these organizations from USAID. Marsha and I have been in Luxembourg, we have been everywhere, educating them on what needs to change. It's a new world. You don't have to spend 12 months, 18 months just doing due diligence while the companies are dying, right? Again, but so there's still a lot that needs to be done. But also we're also trying to encourage new money, right? So rather than waiting for all these DFIs, we're spending to government, we're spending to pension funds, we're spending to banks and other organizations and say, okay, we need to put money in this space, right? So again, we've had our successes, but we also had our failings, right? So we've spent 3-4 years running around Europe and the US looking for funds that were not forthcoming. And so we have not even closed the $60 million fund, but that was we need to invest at smaller levels, right? So, and if I let Marsha loose now, talk about our failures and our challenges, we'll be here for the next 1 hour. Yeah. So again, I think that's the lay of the land. So they're going to be those ups, they're going to be those downs, right? But they just keep going, right? Stubborn on the vision, flexible on the details. Just find a way there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so in conclusion, so I think that's a point on which I'll conclude again. I think we remain very optimistic about the continent, particularly about its young people, because we don't have any other choice. 2030, the population of the continent is almost doubling, right? 2050, right? From Nigeria to Cairo to everywhere. So it's either you turn these young people into a burden or into a boon, right? And the only way you can do that is by creating these companies, creating these jobs, providing digital skills for the millions of young Africans that are going to be born, and granting them the tools that they need to improve their lives. If you don't do it, there will be problems. There will be security issues. There will be issues around the world and stuff like that. So we don't have a choice. So the same way, we can continue to deny climate change and stuff like that, but it's going to happen, right? So in the same way, we don't have a choice, and so that's why we're committed to this. It's not easy, but we continue to do it, and we invite everybody along to believe with us and to do it with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I will actually give Marsha the last word because she would like to say something.
Thank you. Back to Analia's question. She asked Idris, how is it you are so successful? And Idris is a highly successful investor, aggregator of investors, and mentor of successful entrepreneurs. And because of that success, he is sought out by the highest potential entrepreneurs on the continent for guidance and introductions to strategic partners. And the reason, some of those reasons are very logical if you stop to think about it. Idris is an entrepreneur. He is knowledgeable about local markets. He has devoted a lot of effort to building local networks that can support entrepreneurs at the earliest stages. He knows how to introduce them to bankers. He knows how to create partnerships between entrepreneurs at the earliest stages and the authorities that have the capacity to enable rapid, solid growth in their arenas. He helped set up a campus, find a campus for Andela's first Lagos location. He helped introduce Flutterwave to the authorities that enabled them to ramp up their platform. So without those true value adds, they're quiet behind the scenes introductions and advice that makes all the difference in whether those ventures are able to hit their success milestones before they're innovation windows close. So that's why people like him are actually far more valuable than people like me.
You're so gracious, Marsha. So kind. So thank you for believing, and thank you for being there over the past decade, Marsha.
Thank you, Idris. Thank you, Marsha, for making yourself available today. And thank you everyone else for coming. So this session has been recorded and will be made available to other students as well to rewatch. And hope to see you in a couple of weeks with
thank you very much, Oxford. Thank you, Weidenfeld. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.